The sound of laughter echoed through the elegant dining room of the Whitmore estate, but it wasn't the kind that warmed your heart. It was the sharp, cutting laughter that made your stomach turn and your cheeks burn with shame. All eyes were on my hand, specifically on the simple silver band with what appeared to be a modest stone that adorned my ring finger. "Oh, Samantha," my sister Victoria said, barely containing her giggles as she examined my engagement ring with exaggerated interest. "How quaint. Did Marcus get this from a vending machine?" I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The family dinner at my parents' house in Beacon Hill had started pleasantly enough. I'd arrived 30 minutes early, as I always did, hoping to help my mother, Eleanor Whitmore, with the final preparations. The dining room looked immaculate as usual, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over the mahogany table that had been in our family for 3 generations, fine china that Mother only brought out for special occasions, and fresh orchids arranged perfectly in the center. I should have known that announcing my engagement would turn this pleasant evening into a nightmare. "Let me see it again, dear," Mother said, reaching for my hand with the kind of forced smile she wore when she was trying to be polite but was clearly disappointed. She held my hand up to the light, turning it this way and that. "It's interesting, very simple." My father, Charles Whitmore, barely looked up from his wineglass. "I hope you didn't spend too much on it, Marcus," he said to my fiancé, who was sitting uncomfortably in his chair, clearly wishing he could disappear. "Sometimes it's better to save money for more practical things." Marcus Thompson had been nothing but nervous since we'd walked through the front door. I could see the sweat forming on his forehead despite the perfectly controlled temperature in the house. He worked as a high school art teacher at Lincoln High, and being surrounded by the obvious wealth of my family always made him feel out of place. "Actually, Mr. Whitmore," Marcus began, his voice slightly shaky, "I saved for quite a while to get Samantha something special." "I'm sure you did your best with your budget," Victoria interrupted, examining her own manicured nails. At 28, she was 2 years older than me and never let me forget it. She'd married Bradley Pierce, an investment banker, 3 years ago, and her engagement ring was a massive princess-cut diamond that she made sure everyone noticed whenever she gestured. Not everyone can afford the finer things in life. My younger brother, Jonathan, who was 23 and fresh out of Yale, chuckled from across the table. "Come on, Vic, don't be so harsh. I think it's kind of sweet, very humble." The word humble hung in the air like a slap. Jonathan had always been the golden child, captain of the lacrosse team, summa cum laude, and now working at a prestigious law firm downtown. Everything came easily to him, including the casual cruelty that our family seemed to specialize in. "Marcus, honey," my mother said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "where exactly did you purchase this ring? I'm just curious about the style choice." Marcus cleared his throat. "There's this small jewelry shop downtown, Romano's Fine Jewelry. The owner, Mr. Romano, said it was a unique piece, something about the stone being quite rare." "Romano's?" my father interrupted, finally paying attention. "Never heard of it. Is it one of those little shops that cater to, well, to people on a budget?" I felt my cheeks burning. "Dad, that's enough." "Samantha, we're just trying to understand," Mother said, though her tone suggested anything but understanding. "This is a very important decision you're making, and we want to make sure you're being realistic about your future." Victoria leaned back in her chair, a smug smile playing on her lips. "I mean, Bradley spent 3 months' salary on my ring. It's what a man does when he really loves a woman and wants to show the world that she's worth investing in." I glanced at Marcus, who was staring down at his plate like he wanted to disappear into it. The muscles in his jaw were tense, and I could tell he was fighting to keep his composure. This was exactly what I had been afraid of when I'd suggested we announce our engagement to my family. "You know what?" I said, my voice getting stronger. "I love this ring. I love that Marcus chose something unique and thoughtful instead of just buying the biggest diamond he could afford to impress people. Oh, sweetheart, my mother sighed. It's not about impressing people. It's about standards. The Whitmore family has always maintained certain standards. Jonathan set down his fork with a deliberate clink. Samantha, you do realize that an engagement ring is supposed to represent the man's ability to provide for you, right? It's symbolic of his commitment and his financial stability. That's incredibly outdated, Jonathan, I shot back. Is it? He replied, raising an eyebrow. Because I'm looking at that ring, and honestly, it looks like something you might find at a department store. No offense, Marcus. Marcus finally looked up, his face flushed. None taken, he said quietly, though I could tell it was very much taken. Victoria examined her own ring again, making sure the light caught it just right. I just think you deserve better, Samantha. You grew up with beautiful things. You went to the best schools, you've traveled the world, you've been exposed to quality. And now you're settling for this? She gestured dismissively at my ring, and something inside me snapped. I'm not settling for anything, I said, my voice rising. I'm marrying a man who loves me, who treats me with respect, who makes me laugh every single day. A man who saved his money to buy me something he thought was beautiful because he wanted to make me happy. Samantha, please don't get defensive, my father said, swirling his wine. We're just concerned about your future. Marcus seems like a nice enough young man, but let's be practical. A teacher's salary, a ring from some unknown shop downtown, these things matter. They matter to you, I replied. They don't matter to me. My mother reached over and patted my hand condescendingly. Of course they don't matter to you, dear. You've never had to worry about money. But trust me, when you're older and have children to think about, these considerations become very important. Marcus cleared his throat again. Actually, Mrs. Whitmore, I should mention that— Marcus, Victoria interrupted again, I hope you won't be offended if I ask about the stone itself. I mean, from here, it looks like— well, I'm no expert, but it doesn't exactly sparkle like a real diamond should. The entire table went quiet, except for the soft clink of silverware. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, and I saw Marcus's hands clench into fists on his lap. What are you implying, Victoria? I asked, my voice dangerously low. She shrugged, trying to look innocent. I'm not implying anything. I'm just saying that sometimes, when people are on a tight budget, they might choose alternative stones that look similar to diamonds, but aren't quite the real thing. You think my ring is fake? I asked, incredulous. I didn't say it was fake, Victoria backpedaled slightly. I said alternatively, like cubic zirconia or moissanite. There's nothing wrong with that, if that's what you can afford. Jonathan nodded sagely. Those synthetic stones can look quite convincing these days, and honestly, for someone in Marcus's position, it would make more financial sense. I looked around the table at my family, at their perfectly coiffed hair, their designer clothes, their superior expressions, and felt a rage building inside me that I had never experienced before. These people who had raised me, who supposedly loved me, were sitting here systematically destroying the happiest moment of my life. Marcus stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You know what? I think we should go. Marcus, sit down, I said, reaching for his hand. We're not leaving. Samantha, I can't, he began. No, I said firmly, my eyes never leaving my family's faces. We're not running away from this. If they want to question my ring, if they want to insult the man I love, then they can do it to my face. My mother looked uncomfortable for the first time that evening. Samantha, really, we're not trying to insult anyone. We're just concerned. You're concerned? I laughed bitterly. You're concerned about a ring? About money? What about being concerned about my happiness? What about being concerned about the fact that I found someone who loves me for who I am, not for what I can afford to wear on my finger?
Victoria, really, don't be so dramatic, Samantha. We're just being realistic. Realistic? I repeated. Is that what you call this? Because it feels a lot like cruelty to me. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus was still standing, looking like he was ready to bolt for the door, while my family sat there in their perfect clothes at their perfect table, completely unmoved by the pain they had caused. Fine, I said, standing up and taking Marcus's hand. You want to know about this ring? You want to question its value? Then let's find out exactly what it's worth.
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The next morning, I barely slept a wink. Marcus had driven me back to my apartment in Somerville in complete silence, both of us still reeling from the disaster that was supposed to be our engagement celebration. He'd kissed me goodnight at my door, but I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. Not doubt about me, but doubt about whether he was good enough for me, whether he could ever measure up to my family's impossible standards. I called in sick to work at the marketing firm where I was an account manager. I couldn't concentrate on client presentations and campaign strategies when my mind was spinning with everything that had happened. Instead, I found myself pacing around my small but cozy apartment, looking at my ring in different lights, trying to see what my family saw when they looked at it. The stone wasn't huge, maybe half a carat, but it had an unusual cut that Marcus had said caught his eye immediately. It wasn't the traditional round brilliant that Victoria sported, but rather an old European cut that gave it a vintage, almost mysterious quality. The band was platinum, simple and elegant, with tiny accent stones that sparkled when they caught the light just right. To me, it was perfect. It was understated, unique, and chosen with love. But as I stared at it now, I couldn't shake the poisonous words my family had planted in my head. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Samantha, I hope you know we were just looking out for you last night. Maybe we can go ring shopping together this weekend. Bradley knows some excellent jewelers downtown." I deleted the message without responding. 20 minutes later, my mother called. "Darling, I've been thinking about our conversation last night. Your father and I would be happy to help you upgrade that ring. Consider it an early wedding gift." "Mom, I don't want to upgrade anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Samantha, be reasonable. You're Whitmore. People have expectations." I hung up. By noon, I had made a decision. If my family wanted to question the value of my ring, then I would get it appraised by a professional. Not to prove anything to them, but to prove something to myself, that their opinions didn't matter, that the worth of my engagement wasn't determined by a price tag. I grabbed my purse and headed downtown to Romano's Fine Jewelry, the small shop where Marcus had purchased the ring 3 months ago. The store was tucked between a vintage bookshop and a small cafe on Newberry Street, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. The storefront was modest, with a simple black sign and a small display window showcasing a few carefully selected pieces. A bell chimed as I pushed open the door, and I was immediately struck by the warm, inviting atmosphere inside. Unlike the sterile, intimidating jewelry stores in the upscale shopping districts my family frequented, Romano's felt like stepping into someone's home. The walls were lined with glass cases displaying rings, necklaces, and bracelets that seemed to tell stories rather than simply showing off their price tag. "Good afternoon," came a voice with a slight Italian accent. An elderly man emerged from behind the counter, probably in his 70s, with kind eyes and silver hair neatly combed back. "I'm Vincent Romano. How can I help you today?" "Mr. Romano," I said, suddenly feeling nervous, "I'm Samantha Whitmore. My fiancé, Marcus Thompson, bought my engagement ring here a few months ago." His face immediately brightened with recognition. "Ah, yes, Marcus. Such a thoughtful young man. He spent hours here looking at different pieces, asking questions, and you must be the lucky bride-to-be." He gestured to my left hand. "May I see the ring?" I extended my hand, and he took it gently, examining the ring with a jeweler's loop he produced from his vest pocket. His expression was unreadable as he studied the stone and setting. "Beautiful choice," he murmured. "Marcus has excellent taste."
Mr. Romano, I began hesitantly, I was wondering if you could tell me more about this ring. My family, well, they have some questions about it. He looked up at me with those kind eyes, and I felt like he could see right through to the real reason I was there. What kind of questions? They think it might be, well, they're suggesting it might not be a real diamond. Mr. Romano's eyebrows shot up, and for a moment, he looked genuinely surprised. Then, to my complete shock, he began to chuckle, a warm, rich sound that filled the small shop. Not a real diamond, he repeated, shaking his head. Oh, my dear, your family doesn't know what they're looking at. What do you mean? Instead of answering immediately, he walked over to one of his glass cases and pulled out a small black velvet tray. Come here, let me show you something. I followed him to a well-lit workstation in the back of the shop, where he had various jeweler's tools and equipment laid out. He gestured for me to sit on a stool while he positioned himself across from me. First, let me explain something about diamonds, he said, pulling out a different loop, this one more sophisticated than the first. Most people think they know what makes a diamond valuable, but they're only looking at the obvious things: size, clarity, the kind of sparkle they see in commercial advertisements.
He held my hand again, examining my ring more closely. Your ring contains what we call an old European cut diamond. This cutting style was popular from the 1890s to the 1930s, before modern cutting techniques were developed. Is that bad? I asked, worried. Bad? Mr. Romano laughed again. My dear, it's extraordinary. You see, old European cuts were hand-cut by master craftsmen. Each one is unique, with slightly different proportions and characteristics. They don't have the same fire and brilliance as modern cuts, but they have something much rarer: soul. He adjusted his position to get better light on the stone. But that's not even the most interesting part about your ring. My heart was starting to race. What do you mean? Marcus didn't just buy any old European cut diamond, Mr. Romano continued, his voice growing more excited. He bought a very special one. You see this particular color and clarity, the way it catches the light? This isn't just any diamond. He reached for a diamond testing device, a small electronic tool that I'd never seen before. May I? I nodded, watching nervously as he touched the device to my stone. It beeped once, then twice, then displayed something on a small screen that made Mr. Romano's eyes widen. Just as I thought, he murmured. What? What is it? He looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Miss Whitmore, do you know what a Type 2A diamond is? I shook my head. Type 2A diamonds are among the purest diamonds in the world. They contain virtually no nitrogen impurities, which gives them exceptional optical properties. They're extremely rare. Less than 2% of all natural diamonds are Type 2A. My mouth was going dry. And my ring? Your ring contains a Type 2A diamond with what appears to be D color grading, absolutely colorless. And from what I can see with my equipment here, it's flawless or near flawless. I stared at him, not understanding what he was trying to tell me. Is that good? Mr. Romano set down his tools and looked at me seriously. Miss Whitmore, I need to be completely honest with you. When Marcus bought this ring, he told me his budget was limited. He wanted something special for you, something with history and character. I had acquired this piece as part of an estate sale several months earlier. Okay, I said slowly. The woman who sold it to me claimed it was just an old family ring, nothing special. She needed money quickly and was selling off her grandmother's jewelry collection. I bought it based on the setting and the age of the piece, thinking the stone was nice, but nothing extraordinary. He paused, running his fingers through his silver hair. But after Marcus left that day, something about the stone kept bothering me, so I did some additional testing. And I discovered what I sold to your fiancé for $1,500. He paused again, looking directly into my eyes. Well, let's just say that if my suspicions are correct, it's worth considerably more than that. The shop suddenly felt very quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat and the distant sounds of traffic from Newberry Street. How much more? I whispered.
Mr. Romano stood up and walked over to a filing cabinet, pulling out a folder. I've been meaning to contact Marcus about this, but I wanted to be absolutely certain before I said anything. You see, I sent a small sample, just a tiny chip from when I was setting the stone, to a gemological laboratory for professional analysis. He opened the folder and pulled out an official-looking document with a letterhead that read American Gemological Institute. The results came back last week. My hands were shaking as I reached for the paper, but I couldn't focus on the technical jargon and numbers. I don't understand what this means. Mr. Romano sat back down and pointed to a specific line on the report. This line here shows the carat weight, 0.47 carats. This line shows the clarity, FL, which means flawless. This line shows the color, D, which is the highest possible grade. And this line, he pointed to another section, this confirms it's a Type 2A natural diamond with exceptional properties. But what does that mean it's worth?
Mr. Romano was quiet for a long moment. Based on these specifications and current market values for stones of this rarity, he took a deep breath. Conservative estimate? About $2 million. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt dizzy. "That's impossible," I stammered. "I thought so too," Mr. Romano said gently. "That's why I had it tested 3 times by 3 different laboratories. All 3 came back with the same results." I stared down at my ring, this simple, modest band that my family had mocked just 24 hours ago. "But how? How did you not know?" "Sometimes the most valuable things don't look like what people expect them to look like," he said with a sad smile. "The woman who sold it to me had no idea what she had. Her family had probably owned it for generations without ever having it properly appraised. These old European cuts, especially when they're not in flashy modern settings, can be overlooked even by people in the jewelry business." I felt like I was going to faint. "Does Marcus know?" "Not yet. As I said, I was planning to contact him this week. Legally and ethically, the ring belongs to you now. Marcus purchased it in good faith, and I sold it based on the information I had at the time, but I felt he should know what he had accidentally given you." I sat there in Mr. Romano's shop, staring at the gemological report, trying to process what I had just learned. 24 hours ago, my family had humiliated Marcus and me, suggesting that my engagement ring was cheap, possibly fake, and certainly not worthy of the Whitmore name. Now I was holding documentation that proved my modest engagement ring was worth more than most people's houses. The irony was almost too much to bear. I walked out of Romano's fine jewelry in a complete daze, clutching the gemological report in my purse like it was a ticking bomb. The bustling crowds on Newbury Street seemed to move in slow motion around me as I tried to process what had just happened. $2 million. The number kept echoing in my head like a broken record. I found myself sitting on a bench in the Boston Public Garden, staring at the duck pond without really seeing it. Families with children were feeding the ducks, couples were walking hand in hand, and here I was, discovering that I was wearing a fortune on my finger that nobody, not even Marcus, knew about. My phone rang, startling me out of my trance. It was Marcus. "Hey, beautiful," his voice sounded tired. "How are you holding up after last night?" I almost laughed at the question. How was I holding up? 24 hours ago, I thought I knew everything about my life. Now I was sitting in a public park learning that my engagement ring could buy a mansion. "I'm processing," I said carefully. "I'm so sorry about your family, Sam. I knew they'd probably have opinions, but I didn't expect them to be so cruel." There was pain in his voice that made my heart ache. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe I should have saved up longer, gotten you something more impressive. "Marcus, don't you dare apologize for anything," I said fiercely. "You gave me something perfect." "It doesn't feel perfect when your own family is mocking it." I wanted so badly to tell him what I'd just learned, to ease his pain and embarrassment. But something held me back. Mr. Romano's words kept playing in my mind.
Sometimes the most valuable things don't look like what people expect them to look like. Marcus, listen to me, I said, choosing my words carefully. I love this ring. I love that you chose it, and I love that it's not what everyone expects. That makes it even more special. You're just saying that to make me feel better. I'm saying it because it's true. We made plans to meet for dinner that evening, and after we hung up, I continued sitting on that bench, watching the world go by while grappling with the weight of my secret. Should I tell Marcus immediately? Should I confront my family? Should I keep the information to myself? The more I thought about it, the more a plan began to form in my mind. That evening, Marcus and I met at Antonio's, a small Italian restaurant in the North End that had become our special place. It was where we'd had our first date 2 years ago, where he'd told me he loved me for the first time, and where we'd celebrated every milestone in our relationship since. You seem different tonight, Marcus observed. More, I don't know, confident? I smiled, twirling pasta around my fork. I went back to Romano's today. Marcus nearly choked on his wine. You what? Why? I wanted to learn more about the ring, about its history.
Sam, please tell me you didn't ask him to take it back or exchange it for something else, because I can't afford. Nothing like that, I interrupted quickly. I just wanted to understand what makes it special, and Mr. Romano told me some very interesting things. Marcus leaned forward, looking worried. Like what? I decided to share some of what I'd learned, but not everything. Not yet. Did you know that this is called an old European cut? I asked, holding up my hand so the restaurant's candlelight caught the stone. It's a vintage cutting style from the early 1900s. Each one is unique because they were hand-cut by master craftsmen. Marcus's expression softened. Really? And the stone itself is exceptionally pure. Mr. Romano said it's what's called a Type 2A diamond, which is incredibly rare. Less than 2% of all natural diamonds fall into that category. I had no idea, Marcus said, looking down at the ring with new appreciation. Mr. Romano didn't mention any of that when I bought it. Maybe he didn't realize how special it was at the time, I said, which was technically true. For the rest of dinner, I shared more details about the ring's craftsmanship and rarity, watching as Marcus's confidence slowly returned. By the time we left the restaurant, he was walking taller, holding my hand with pride instead of shame. I'm so glad you went back there, he said as we walked along the harbor. I was starting to doubt myself after last night. Your family made me feel like I'd failed you. You could never fail me, I said, squeezing his hand. And speaking of my family, I've been thinking about what happened last night. Sam, let's just forget about it. We don't need their approval. No, we don't, I agreed. But I think they need to understand something about assumptions and appearances. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face me. What do you mean? I mean that maybe it's time my family learned that things aren't always what they seem. The next few days were torture. I went through the motions of my normal routine, work, gym, grocery shopping, but my mind was constantly occupied with planning. I researched everything I could about rare diamonds, about Type 2A stones, about the jewelry market. I wanted to be absolutely prepared for what I was about to do. Victoria called twice, both times with thinly veiled offers to help me upgrade my ring. Jonathan sent a text suggesting that Marcus might benefit from some financial planning advice. My mother left a voicemail about a wonderful young jeweler that the country club ladies recommended. Each contact from my family made me more determined to follow through with my plan. On Thursday afternoon, I called my mother. "Samantha, darling," she answered on the first ring. "I was just thinking about you. Have you given any more thought to what we discussed about your ring?" "Actually, Mom, I have. And I think you're right." There was a pause. "I am?" "Yes. I think it would be good to get a professional opinion about the ring. You know, just to be sure about what we're dealing with." "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so glad you're being sensible about this. Your father will be so pleased. I was thinking we could all go together this Saturday. You, Dad, Victoria, Jonathan, Marcus, and me. Make it a family outing." "That's a wonderful idea. I know the perfect place. Pemberton and Associates downtown. They're the most prestigious jewelers in Boston. Very exclusive clientele."
Actually, Mom, I was thinking we should go somewhere more objective, somewhere that doesn't know our family, so we can get an unbiased opinion. Well, I suppose that makes sense. Where did you have in mind? There's a certified gemologist named Dr. Patricia Caldwell who works independently. She's not affiliated with any jewelry store, so she has no reason to inflate or deflate values. Very professional, very thorough. I had spent hours researching Dr. Caldwell online. She was indeed one of the most respected independent gemologists in New England, with credentials from the Gemological Institute of America and 25 years of experience. Her reviews were impeccable, and her client list included museums, auction houses, and insurance companies. I've never heard of her, my mother said, suspiciously.
That's because she doesn't advertise to retail customers. She usually works with institutions and high-end collectors, but I managed to get us an appointment for Saturday at 2 o'clock. How did you manage that? I told her office that we needed an insurance appraisal for a family heirloom, I said, which was technically true. They were very accommodating. By Saturday morning, I was a bundle of nerves. Marcus had agreed to come, though he was clearly dreading another confrontation with my family. I had assured him that this would be different, that we were simply getting factual information, nothing more. "Are you sure about this, Sam?" he asked as we drove toward downtown Boston. "I mean, what if the appraisal comes back lower than what I paid for it? Your family will never let me live it down." "Marcus, trust me on this," I said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "Whatever happens today, we're going to be fine." We met my family outside Dr. Caldwell's office building on State Street. The building was old but well-maintained, with the kind of understated elegance that spoke of serious business conducted within its walls. Victoria was dressed to the nines, as usual, her massive engagement ring catching the afternoon sunlight like a disco ball. "Well, this should be interesting," she said with barely concealed glee. "I do hope Marcus won't be too disappointed with the results." "Victoria, please," I said quietly, "let's just see what the expert has to say." Dr. Caldwell's office was on the 15th floor, and the elevator ride up felt like it lasted forever. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The office itself was professional but warm, with diplomas and certifications covering one wall and several high-end microscopes and testing equipment visible through a glass partition. Dr. Caldwell herself was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Thank you all for coming," she said as we settled into the consultation area. "I understand you'd like me to evaluate a ring for insurance purposes." "That's right," I said, sliding the ring off my finger. "We'd like to know exactly what we're dealing with." Dr. Caldwell took the ring and examined it first with her naked eye, then with a handheld loupe. Her expression remained neutral, professional. "This is a lovely piece," she said. "May I ask where it was acquired?" "A small shop downtown," Marcus said quietly. "Romano's fine jewelry." "Ah, Vincent Romano. He's got an excellent eye for quality pieces." Dr. Caldwell looked up at Marcus. "You chose well." Victoria snorted softly. "We'll see about that." Dr. Caldwell either didn't hear the comment or chose to ignore it. "If you don't mind, I'd like to take this into my lab for proper analysis. It should take about 30 minutes for a thorough evaluation." "30 minutes?" my father asked, checking his Rolex. "That seems excessive for a simple appraisal." "Sir, there's nothing simple about properly evaluating a diamond," Dr. Caldwell replied politely but firmly. "If you want an accurate assessment, I need to test for authenticity, measure precise dimensions, evaluate clarity under proper magnification, and assess color under controlled lighting conditions." She disappeared into her lab with my ring, leaving the 6 of us sitting in uncomfortable silence in her waiting area. "Well," Victoria said after a few minutes, "this is certainly dramatic. All this fuss over a little ring." "It's not a fuss," I said calmly. "It's being thorough." Jonathan was scrolling through his phone. "I looked up this Dr. Caldwell online. She's apparently very expensive. This appraisal's probably costing more than the ring is worth." "Jonathan," my mother warned. "What? I'm just saying. We could have gotten this done at any jewelry store for free." "Free appraisals are usually just sales pitches," I replied. Dr. Caldwell has no agenda except accuracy. 25 minutes into the wait, Dr. Caldwell emerged from her lab with a puzzled expression on her face. She was carrying my ring and a file folder. "Is everything all right?" I asked, though I already knew what was coming. "I'm going to need to ask you some questions about this ring's provenance," she said, sitting down across from us. "Specifically, where and when it was acquired, and whether you have any documentation about its history." My family exchanged glances. This wasn't what they had expected.
Is there a problem? My father asked. Dr. Caldwell opened her folder and pulled out what looked like a preliminary report. Not a problem exactly, but this ring is quite remarkable, and I want to make sure I have all the relevant information before I finalize my assessment. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Thompson, you said you purchased this at Romano's Fine Jewelry. Do you remember approximately when? 3 months ago, Marcus replied, looking confused. Is something wrong with it? Wrong? Dr. Caldwell smiled for the first time since we'd arrived. No, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. She handed me my ring back, and I slipped it onto my finger with trembling hands. In fact, she continued, consulting her notes, this is one of the most exceptional pieces I've had the pleasure of examining in quite some time. Dr. Caldwell's words hung in the air like electricity before a storm. I could feel my family's confidence beginning to waver as they processed what she had just said. Exceptional was not the word they had been expecting to hear. What exactly do you mean by exception? My father asked, his voice taking on the cautious tone he used during difficult business negotiations. Dr. Caldwell adjusted her glasses and consulted her notes again. Well, let me start with the basics. This is indeed a genuine diamond, and before anyone asks, yes, I'm absolutely certain. I've tested it with multiple methods, including thermal conductivity, electrical conductivity, and spectroscopic analysis. Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Of course it's real. We never said it wasn't real. We just thought it might be lower quality. Lower quality? Dr. Caldwell repeated, raising an eyebrow. I'm afraid that's quite the opposite of what we're dealing with here. She opened her folder and pulled out a magnifying glass, holding my ring up to the light. This stone exhibits characteristics that are extremely rare in the diamond market. The cut is what we call an Old European cut, which dates to approximately 1900 to 1930. These were hand-cut by master craftsmen before modern cutting techniques were developed. So it's old? Jonathan said dismissively. That usually means less valuable, right? Outdated technology and all that. Dr. Caldwell smiled patiently. Actually, old European cuts are highly sought after by collectors precisely because of their handcrafted nature. But that's just the beginning of what makes this stone special. She pulled out a small device that looked like a high-tech flashlight. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to my hand. I extended it, and she shined the light through my diamond from different angles. "The clarity of this stone is remarkable," she continued. "Under 10x magnification, I can find virtually no inclusions. In gemological terms, this would be graded as FL, flawless. That's exceptionally rare. Most diamonds, even expensive ones, have some visible inclusions." My mother leaned forward, her expression shifting from skeptical to confused. "But surely that's not unusual for a quality diamond?" "Mrs. Whitmore, flawless diamonds represent less than 1% of all diamonds mined. They're extremely rare and correspondingly valuable." Marcus was staring at my ring like he'd never seen it before. "But Mr. Romano never mentioned any of this when I bought it." "That brings me to my next point," Dr. Caldwell said, pulling out what looked like a spectrometer reading. "The color grade of this diamond is D, absolutely colorless. Combined with the flawless clarity, that puts this stone in the highest possible category for both color and clarity." "Okay," Victoria said slowly, "but it's still quite small. Size matters in diamonds, doesn't it?" Dr. Caldwell consulted her measurements. The stone weighs 0.47 carats, which is indeed modest by today's standards. However, when you combine that carat weight with D color, FL clarity, and excellent proportions in an antique cut, size becomes much less relevant to value. She paused and looked around at all of us. "But there's something else that makes this diamond truly extraordinary."
The room fell silent except for the hum of the building's air conditioning. I could practically hear my family's hearts beating. This is what we call a Type 2A diamond, Dr. Caldwell explained. Type 2A diamonds contain virtually no nitrogen impurities, making them chemically pure and optically superior. They're incredibly rare. Less than 2% of all natural diamonds fall into this category. Jonathan frowned. What does that mean in practical terms? It means this diamond has exceptional optical properties. The way it refracts light, its brilliance, and fire are superior to typical diamonds. Famous Type 2A diamonds include the Cullinan, the Koh-i-Noor, and many of the world's most celebrated stones.
Victoria's face had gone pale. You're saying this little ring contains the same type of diamond as crown jewels? The same type, yes. Obviously not the same size or historical significance, but the same fundamental characteristics that make those stones so prized. My father cleared his throat. Dr. Caldwell, while this is all very interesting from a gemological perspective, what we really need to know is the practical value for insurance purposes. Dr. Caldwell nodded and pulled out her final report. Of course, valuation is always the bottom line. She put on her reading glasses and consulted the document. Based on current market conditions, comparable sales data, and the unique characteristics of this stone, I would place the insurance replacement value at— She paused, double-checking her figures. $2.1 million. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as the color drained from Victoria's face, saw my father's mouth fall open, witnessed my mother's hand fly to her chest in shock. Jonathan's phone slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. Marcus looked like he had been struck by lightning. "I'm sorry," my mother stammered. "Did you say 2 million?" 2.1 million, yes, Dr. Caldwell confirmed calmly. Obviously, that's the insurance replacement value, which tends to be on the higher end. The actual market value for resale would likely be somewhat lower, perhaps in the 1.5 to 1.8 million range, depending on the buyer and market conditions. Victoria found her voice first. "That's impossible. Marcus bought that ring at some little shop downtown. He's a teacher. He couldn't afford." "Mr. Thompson," Dr. Caldwell addressed Marcus directly, "what did you pay for this ring, if you don't mind me asking?" Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. $1,500, he whispered. Dr. Caldwell nodded sympathetically. That's not uncommon in cases like this. Estate jewelry, especially pieces from the early 20th century, can be significantly undervalued if the seller doesn't understand what they have. The gentleman who sold this to you likely had no idea of its true worth. "But how is that possible?" my father demanded. "Surely a professional jeweler would know." "You'd be surprised," Dr. Caldwell replied. "Old European cuts don't have the same obvious sparkle as modern cuts. To an untrained eye, they can appear duller, less impressive. And testing for Type 2A characteristics requires sophisticated equipment that many smaller shops don't have." She gestured to my ring. "This stone probably sat in someone's jewelry box for decades, perhaps passed down through generations, with the family never realizing what they owned. When they decided to sell it, they likely just wanted quick cash and didn't invest in a proper appraisal." Marcus finally found his voice. "Are you absolutely certain about this valuation?" "Mr. Thompson, I stake my professional reputation on my assessments. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've appraised jewelry for museums, auction houses, and insurance companies worldwide. This evaluation has been triple-checked." She handed him a copy of the official appraisal report. "You'll want to contact your insurance company immediately to update your coverage, and I would strongly recommend getting a safety deposit box if you don't already have one." Victoria was staring at my ring like it might bite her. "I don't understand. It doesn't look like it's worth $2 million. "That's exactly the point," Dr. Caldwell said with a slight smile. "The most valuable things rarely announce themselves. This ring's beauty lies in its subtlety, its history, its rarity. It doesn't need to scream for attention because its worth is intrinsic, not superficial." The implications of her words weren't lost on anyone in the room. My mother was the first to recover from the shock.
Samantha, darling, this changes everything. You'll need to take special precautions, perhaps get a replica made for everyday wear. No, I said firmly, speaking for the first time since Dr. Caldwell had begun her revelation. I'm not hiding this ring away. Marcus chose it for me because it's beautiful and unique, not because of its monetary value. I'm going to wear it every day, just like I plan to. But Samantha, Jonathan protested, you can't just walk around wearing $2 million on your finger. It's not safe. People wear expensive jewelry all the time, I replied calmly. The difference is that this ring doesn't look expensive to people who judge value by size and flash. I looked around at my family, seeing them in a new light. 24 hours ago, they had been so confident in their ability to judge worth based on appearances. Now they were scrambling to understand how they had been so completely wrong.
Marcus, my father said, his voice subdued, I owe you an apology. We all do. Marcus nodded stiffly but didn't respond. I could see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to process everything that had just happened. Dr. Caldwell, Victoria said hesitantly, is there any chance you could be mistaken? I mean, $2 million for a ring that cost $1,500? Miss, I understand your skepticism, Dr. Caldwell replied professionally, but these findings have been verified through multiple testing methods. The gemological properties don't lie. She began packing up her equipment. If you'd like a second opinion, I can recommend several other certified gemologists who would give you similar results, though I should warn you that word tends to travel quickly in our community when stones like this surface. What do you mean? I asked. A Type 2A diamond of this quality and provenance is quite newsworthy in gemological circles. Don't be surprised if you start getting calls from collectors, museums, or auction houses once word gets out. My family exchanged glances, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what they were dealing with. Of course, Dr. Caldwell continued, all of my client interactions are strictly confidential unless you specifically authorize me to discuss them. Your privacy is completely protected. As we prepared to leave, Dr. Caldwell handed me her card. Miss Whitmore, if you ever decide to sell this piece or need any additional documentation, please don't hesitate to contact me. Stones like this are once-in-a-lifetime discoveries. In the elevator on the way down, the silence was suffocating. My family, who had been so quick with their opinions and judgments just days before, seemed to have lost their voices entirely. Marcus stood beside me, still clutching the appraisal report like a lifeline. I could practically see him replaying every moment of our relationship, wondering what this revelation meant for us, for our future, for everything he thought he knew about himself and his place in my world. When we reached the lobby, my mother finally spoke. Samantha, we need to talk about this as a family. This changes so many things. No, Mom, I said, taking Marcus's hand. It doesn't change anything that matters. But as I looked at the stunned faces around me, I realized that while the ring's value hadn't changed who I was or how I felt about Marcus, it had certainly changed how my family saw both of us. And that was just the beginning of the reckoning that was about to unfold. The car ride back to my apartment was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Marcus drove in complete silence, his knuckles white against the steering wheel, while I sat in the passenger seat trying to figure out what to say. The appraisal report sat folded in my purse like evidence of a crime we'd accidentally committed. When we finally reached my building, Marcus turned off the engine, but made no move to get out. He just sat there, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Marcus, I said softly, please talk to me. He let out a long breath and finally turned to look at me. His eyes were filled with a mixture of disbelief, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite identify. $2 million, Sam, he said quietly. You gave me a ring you chose because you thought it was beautiful and unique, I corrected. The price tag doesn't change that, doesn't it? He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize when he was stressed. I'm a high school art teacher who makes $42,000 a year. I just accidentally bought you something worth more than I'll make in my entire lifetime. Marcus, do you know what this means? He continued, his voice rising slightly. Your family was right.
I can't provide for you. I can't give you the life you deserve. I got lucky, incredibly, impossibly lucky, but that's all it was, luck. I felt my heart breaking as I watched him spiral into self-doubt. That's not true, and you know it. Is it? Because right now, I feel like a fraud. Your family looks at me like I'm some charity case who doesn't belong in your world, and maybe they're right. My family was wrong about everything, I said firmly. They judged you, they judged the ring, they judged our entire relationship based on their own shallow values. And look how that turned out. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then shook his head. This is going to change everything between us, isn't it? Only if we let it. But even as I said the words, I could feel the truth of his fear. The revelation had shifted something fundamental in our dynamic, and we both knew it.
We went upstairs to my apartment, where Marcus immediately began pacing around my living room like a caged animal. I made tea that neither of us drank while watching him process what had happened. "I need to call Mr. Romano," he said suddenly. "He needs to know about this, and I should probably, I don't know, pay him the difference? Give him a percentage? There has to be some ethical way to handle this." "Marcus, Dr. Caldwell said you bought the ring in good faith. Mr. Romano sold it based on what he knew at the time. No one did anything wrong." "But it feels wrong," he insisted. "It feels like I stole something." My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "We need to talk. Family dinner tomorrow night. This conversation isn't over." I showed Marcus the message, and he groaned. "Great, round two." "You don't have to come. I can handle my family." "No," he said, straightening his shoulders with determination. "I'm not running away from this. We're in this together, whatever happens." The next evening, we found ourselves back at my parents' house, but the atmosphere was completely different from our last visit. Instead of smugness and condescension, there was an awkward tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the elegant dining room. My mother had prepared Marcus's favorite dish, her famous beef Wellington, which was either a peace offering or an attempt to butter him up before whatever conversation was coming. Victoria and Jonathan were already seated when we arrived, both looking unusually subdued. "Marcus," my father said as we sat down, his tone formal but respectful, "I want to start by apologizing for our behavior the other night. We were out of line." "We all were," my mother added quickly. "We made assumptions that were completely unfounded." Marcus nodded stiffly. "Thank you, I appreciate that." Victoria, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "I've been thinking about this whole situation, and I have to ask, did you know? When you bought the ring, did you have any idea what it was worth?" "Of course not," Marcus replied. "If I had known, do you think I could have afforded it?" "Then how did you choose it?" Jonathan asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Out of all the rings in the shop, what made you pick that one?" Marcus glanced at me before answering. I'd been looking at rings for weeks, going to different shops, trying to find something that felt right for Samantha. Everything I saw was either too expensive or too ordinary. When I walked into Mr. Romano's shop, this ring caught my eye immediately. "Why?" my mother asked. "Because it was different," Marcus said, warning to the subject. "It wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was beautiful in a quiet, confident way. It reminded me of Samantha. Elegant, unique, with depth that most people might miss if they didn't take the time to really look." The room fell silent at his words. Even Victoria seemed affected by his sincerity. "And the fact that it was within my budget felt like a sign," Marcus continued. "Mr. Romano told me it had history, that it was special. I believed him, but I thought he was talking about craftsmanship, not the monetary value." My father cleared his throat. "Marcus, I hope you understand that our concern wasn't really about the ring itself. We worry about Samantha's future, about whether she'll be comfortable." "Dad," I interjected, "I can take care of myself." "I know you can, sweetheart," he replied, "but it's natural for parents to want their children to maintain the lifestyle they grew up with." "The lifestyle I grew up with included a lot of things," I said pointedly. "Not all of them are good."
Victoria looked stung. What's that supposed to mean? It means that growing up wealthy also taught me to judge people by their possessions, to assume that expensive equals valuable, and to look down on anyone who doesn't meet certain arbitrary standards. Those aren't qualities I'm proud of. Samantha, that's not fair, my mother protested. Isn't it? 3 days ago, you all treated Marcus like he was beneath our family because his ring didn't look expensive enough. You made him feel ashamed of something beautiful that he'd chosen with love and care, and you were completely wrong. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We've apologized for that. Yes, you have. But the apology only came after you found out the ring was worth millions. What if it had been appraised at exactly what Marcus paid for it? Would you have apologized then? The silence that followed was telling.
Marcus reached for my hand under the table. Sam, it's okay. They're trying to make things right. Are they? I asked, looking around the table. Or are they just recalibrating their treatment of you based on new information about your accidental wealth? Victoria's face flushed red. That's not... We would have... Would you have? I pressed. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your respect for Marcus increased by exactly $2 million. My father set down his wine glass with a sharp clink. Samantha, that's enough. We're trying to move forward here. So am I, Dad, but moving forward means acknowledging that this whole situation has revealed some uncomfortable truths about our family's values. And what truths are those? My mother asked, her voice tight. That we measure people's worth by their bank accounts, that we assume external appearances tell us everything we need to know about quality and value, that we've become so obsessed with status and image that we've forgotten how to recognize genuine worth when we see it. Marcus squeezed my hand, warning me to ease up, but I was on a roll. Marcus didn't become a better man when we found out the ring was valuable, I continued. He didn't become more worthy of respect or more suitable for me. He was always those things. The only thing that changed was your perception, and that says nothing about him and everything about us. Victoria finally found her voice. Fine, you've made your point. We're shallow and materialistic. Are you happy now? No, I said sadly. I'm not happy at all. Because this could have been a beautiful moment, announcing our engagement, celebrating our love, bringing Marcus into the family. Instead, it turned into a judgment and humiliation session that could have destroyed our relationship. But it didn't, Marcus said gently. We're still here. We're still together. Yes, but what about the next time? I asked. What happens when other people make assumptions about us based on this ring? What happens when Marcus's colleagues find out he's engaged to someone wearing a $2 million diamond? How do we navigate a world where people will either dismiss him as a gold digger or assume I'm slumming it for entertainment? The questions hung heavy in the air. These were the complications I'd been thinking about since leaving Dr. Caldwell's office, the real-world implications of our fairy tale discovery. Maybe, my mother said hesitantly, you should consider getting a replica made for everyday wear. Keep the real ring for special occasions. No, I said firmly. I'm not hiding what I have or pretending to be something I'm not. This ring represents our love story, the good and the complicated. I'm not ashamed of it. Marcus looked at me with such love and pride that my heart ached. Are you sure about that, Sam? Because I need you to be absolutely certain that this is what you want, a lifetime of questions and assumptions and complications. I'm sure, I said without hesitation. The question is, are you? He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him weighing everything, the awkwardness, the unwanted attention, the way this discovery had already changed how people saw him. Finally, he smiled. You know what? Let them talk. Let them make their assumptions. We know the truth about our relationship, about our love, about what really matters. And anyone who can't see past a piece of jewelry to the people wearing it isn't worth our time anyway. Victoria shook her head in amazement. You're both crazy. You're going to spend your lives dealing with the complications of that ring instead of just enjoying the windfall. Maybe, I admitted, but we'll deal with them together. And for the first time since this whole ordeal began, that felt like enough.
3 weeks after the appraisal, I was beginning to understand what Dr. Caldwell had meant about word traveling quickly in gemological circles. It started with a phone call from a journalist at Gemstone Quarterly who had somehow gotten wind of the story. Then came an email from a private collector in Switzerland, followed by a call from the American Museum of Natural History, expressing interest in featuring the ring in an upcoming exhibition about remarkable diamond discoveries. "This is getting out of hand," Marcus said as he scrolled through my voicemails while we sat in our favorite coffee shop near his school. "There's a producer here from some documentary series about hidden treasures. They want to film us for an episode." I sipped my latte and watched him grow more overwhelmed by the minute. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of insurance adjustments, security consultations, and unwanted attention that we never could have anticipated. "We don't have to talk to any of them," I reminded him. "Dr. Caldwell said all client information was confidential unless we authorized disclosure."
But that's just it. We didn't authorize anything, and yet somehow the story is out there anyway. Marcus set down my phone with frustration. Yesterday, 3 of my students asked if it was true that I was marrying a millionaire. Today, the principal called me into his office to discuss whether I needed additional security at the school. The attention had been building gradually. First, it was whispered conversations that stopped when we entered rooms. Then came the not-so-subtle stares at my ring whenever we went out. Last week, someone had actually followed us home from dinner and tried to take photos of my hand. "Maybe Victoria was right," Marcus continued. "Maybe we should get a replica made. This is affecting your life too. Didn't you say your boss asked you about it?" I nodded reluctantly. 3 days ago, my supervisor at the marketing firm had called me into her office after a client had mentioned seeing my ring and asking if I was related to those Whitmores with all the money. The conversation had been awkward, with barely concealed implications about whether my family connections influenced my work. "Mrs. Henderson said she was just curious," I explained, but I could tell she was wondering if I was some rich girl playing at having a career. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Marcus said, running his hands through his hair in that familiar gesture of stress. "People are going to make assumptions about both of us now. They'll think I'm a gold digger who got lucky, and they'll think you're some privileged princess slumming it with their help." Before I could respond, a woman approached our table hesitantly. She was well-dressed, probably in her 50s, with perfectly styled gray hair and expensive jewelry that screamed old money. "Excuse me," she said with a practiced smile, "but aren't you Samantha Whitmore?" My heart sank. "Yes, I am." "I'm Patricia Ashworth. I sit on the board of the Boston Symphony with your mother." She glanced down at my ring with obvious interest. "I hope you don't mind, but I had to come over and see the famous ring everyone's talking about. Eleanor showed me photos, but seeing it in person is quite different." I forced a polite smile while internally cringing. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Ashworth." "And you must be the lucky young man who found this treasure," she said to Marcus, extending her hand. "What an incredible stroke of fortune. You must feel like you won the lottery." Marcus shook her hand stiffly. "Something like that." "I actually know the Romano family quite well," Mrs. Ashworth continued, clearly setting in for a longer conversation than either of us wanted. "Vincent's father used to do work for my family back in the 60s. Salt-of-the-earth people, but not exactly experts in high-end gemology, if you know what I mean." "Mr. Romano is a skilled jeweler," I said defensively. "Oh, of course, dear. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. It's just fascinating how these things work out sometimes. A working-class jeweler accidentally sells a priceless diamond to a school teacher who's marrying into one of Boston's oldest families. It's like something out of a novel." The way she said working class and school teacher made it clear that these weren't compliments in her world. Marcus's jaw tensed, and I could see him struggling to maintain his composure. "Well," Mrs. Ashworth continued, oblivious to the tension she was creating, "I suppose it just goes to show that love conquers all, doesn't it? Even class differences." "There are no class differences between Marcus and me," I said firmly. "Of course not, dear," she replied with the kind of patronizing smile that made my skin crawl.
I just meant that it's wonderful when people from different backgrounds can find common ground. After she finally left, Marcus and I sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. Different backgrounds, he repeated bitterly. Common ground. Did you hear how she talked about me? Like I'm some charity case you're taking pity on? Marcus, she's a snob. Her opinion doesn't matter. But it does matter, Sam. Don't you see? This is going to be our life now. Every social event, every family gathering, every time we go out in public, people are going to look at us and see a story that fits their preconceptions about class and money and worth. I reached across the table and took his hand. Then we'll prove them wrong. How? By hiding the ring? By pretending it doesn't exist? By constantly defending our relationship to people who have already made up about us? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. Saw the article in the Globe. When were you planning to tell us about the documentary offer? What article? Asked, seeing my expression.
I quickly searched for Whitmore engagement ring on my phone, and there it was, a small piece in the Boston Globe's lifestyle section titled Hidden Treasure, Local Teacher's $2 million Surprise. The article didn't mention our names, but it had enough details that anyone who knew us would recognize the story. Sources close to the couple say the discovery has attracted international attention, Marcus read over my shoulder. The ring is reportedly being studied by gemologists worldwide as an example of how valuable pieces can hide in plain sight. Sources close to the couple? I said incredulously. Who would talk to a reporter about this? My phone rang immediately. It was my mother. Samantha, darling, we need to discuss damage control, she said without preamble. Your father's gotten 3 calls already from people asking about this newspaper story. The Pemberton charity auction is next week, and everyone will be talking about this. Mom, we didn't talk to any reporters. I know, sweetheart, but the story is out there now, and we need to manage it properly. Your father thinks it might be wise to hire a publicist. A publicist? For what? To control the narrative, dear. Right now, people are free to speculate and gossip. If we get ahead of the story, we can frame it properly. I looked at Marcus, who was shaking his head in disbelief. Mom, this is getting ridiculous. It's just an engagement ring. It's a $2 million engagement ring that's becoming a news story, Samantha. Whether we like it or not, this affects the entire family's reputation. After I hung up, Marcus leaned back in his chair and laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. A publicist, he said. We need a publicist for our engagement? Do you hear how insane that sounds? It is insane, I agreed, and we're not doing it. But your parents are right about one thing. This is affecting your family's reputation. Your mother has to deal with questions at charity events. Your father's business associates are probably gossiping about it. Jonathan and Victoria are probably fielding questions from their friends. So what? Let them handle it however they want. That doesn't mean we have to participate in some media circus. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the college students walking by, young people with backpacks and dreams, and normal problems like midterm exams and part-time jobs. I've been thinking, he said finally. Maybe we should sell it. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Think about it, Sam. We could sell the ring, pay off our student loans, buy a house, set up college funds for our future kids. We could live comfortably for the rest of our lives without any of this drama or attention. But it's our engagement ring, I protested. It's the ring you chose for me. I chose a $1,500 ring for you, he corrected gently. This $2 million circus isn't what either of us signed up for. I stared down at my ring, this beautiful, complicated piece of jewelry that had turned our simple love story into a public spectacle. Part of me understood Marcus's logic. The money could indeed change our lives, eliminate financial stress, give us opportunities we'd never dreamed of. But another part of me rebelled against the idea of letting outside pressure dictate our choices. Marcus, I said slowly, if we sell this ring because we can't handle the attention, what does that say about us? What does that say about our ability to face challenges together?
It says we're practical people who know when to cut our losses. Or it says we're people who run away when things get difficult. He sighed deeply. Maybe running away isn't the worst option sometimes. That evening, as I sat alone in my apartment after Marcus had gone home to grade papers, I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, focusing on the ring that had started it all. The stone caught the light from the vanity bulbs, throwing tiny rainbows across the white tile walls. 3 weeks ago, this ring had represented nothing more complicated than love and commitment. Now it was a symbol of class warfare, media attention, family drama, and societal expectations that I'd never wanted to navigate. But as I looked at it, really looked at it, I realized something important. The ring itself hadn't changed. It was still the same beautiful, unique piece that had caught Marcus's eye in Miss Romano's shop. It still represented the same love, the same commitment, the same hope for our future together. What had changed was everything around it. The people, the assumptions, the complications. Those were external forces that had nothing to do with the ring itself or what it meant to our relationship. The question was, were Marcus and I strong enough to hold on to what mattered while letting go of what didn't? My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "I'm sorry about today. I don't really want to sell the ring. I just want our life back." I texted back, "Our life isn't gone. It's just got some extra baggage now. We'll figure it out." But as I prepared for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were approaching a crossroads that would define not just our engagement, but our entire future together. The Pemberton charity auction was exactly the kind of event I'd been dreading. Boston's social elite gathered in the Four Seasons ballroom, wearing their finest gowns and most impressive jewelry, ready to see and be seen while raising money for childhood literacy programs. Under normal circumstances, I would have attended with my family, made polite conversation, and bid on a silent auction item or two. But these weren't normal circumstances. I was now the girl with the famous ring, and everyone knew it. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked as we walked through the hotel lobby. He looked handsome in his rented tuxedo, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "We could still leave, claim you're feeling sick." "No," I said firmly, adjusting his bow tie with steady hands. "We're not hiding anymore." The past week has been a turning point for both of us. After days of agonizing over whether to sell the ring, avoid public events, or hire the publicist my parents wanted, we'd finally had the conversation that changed everything. It happened at Romano's Fine Jewelry, of all places. We'd gone there to ask Mr. Romano about the media attention and to make sure he wasn't being harassed by reporters. Instead, we found him in his workshop, carefully repairing a simple gold band that belonged to an elderly woman who'd been coming to him for 30 years. "Ah, the famous couple," he'd said with a warm smile, setting down his tools. "How are you handling all the excitement?" "Not well," Marcus had admitted. "We're thinking about selling the ring." Mr. Romano's face had fallen. "Selling it? But why?" "Because it's causing too many problems," I'd explained. "People treat us differently now. They make assumptions about our relationship, our motivations, our future. It's affecting everything." Mr. Romano had listened quietly as we poured out our frustrations, the media attention, the family pressure, the social complications, the way people looked at us now. When we finished, he'd been quiet for a long moment, then walked over to his display case and pulled out a simple silver locket. "This belonged to my wife, Isabella," he'd said softly. "She wore it every day for 43 years of marriage. When she passed away last spring, people told me I should sell it, use the money for something practical. After all, it's just silver and glass, worth maybe $50. He'd opened the locket to reveal a tiny black and white photograph of a young woman with kind eyes. "But this locket isn't valuable because of what it's made of," he continued. "It's valuable because of what it represents. Love, commitment, memories, hope. The same way your ring isn't valuable because it's worth $2 million. It's valuable because Marcus chose it for you with love, because it represents your commitment to each other, because it's part of your story." He'd looked directly at Marcus. "You didn't choose that ring because it was expensive. You chose it because it spoke to you, because it reminded you of Samantha. The money doesn't change that. The attention doesn't change that. Other people's opinions don't change that. Then he turned to me. And you, my dear, you said yes to Marcus because you love him, not because of what he could afford to buy you. A ring worth $1,500 or $2 million? The love is the same, yes? That conversation had crystallized something for both of us. We weren't going to let other people's reactions dictate our choices. We weren't going to hide or sell or apologize for something beautiful that had happened to us. So here we were, walking into the lion's den with our heads held high. The reactions started immediately. Conversations paused as we entered the ballroom. Heads turned. I felt the familiar weight of dozens of eyes focusing on my left hand. "Samantha, darling," my mother appeared at my side, resplendent in midnight blue silk. "You look lovely. And Marcus, how nice to see you." Her tone was warmer than it had been in weeks. Ever since the newspaper article, my parents had been treating Marcus with a newfound respect that, while welcome, felt somewhat hollow. "The Ashworths are here," she whispered to me, "and the Pemberton family specifically asked to meet you both. They're fascinated by your story." "Our story isn't entertainment for their dinner party conversation," I replied quietly. Before my mother could respond, Victoria appeared with Bradley in tow. My sister looked stunning as always, but I noticed she'd chosen to wear a different ring tonight, a simple sapphire band instead of her usual massive diamond. "Interesting choice," I commented, nodding toward her hand. Victoria glanced down and shrugged. "Sometimes bigger isn't better. I'm learning that." It was the closest thing to an admission of fault I'd ever heard from my sister, and I felt a rush of affection for her. The evening progressed with the usual charity auction rituals: cocktails, dinner, speeches about the importance of childhood literacy programs. Throughout it all, I was acutely aware of the attention we were receiving. Some people approached us directly, asking about the ring with varying degrees of tact. Others simply stared from across the room. But something unexpected began to happen as the night wore on. Several people, particularly some of the older women who'd known my family for years, began sharing their own stories about jewelry and its meaning.
Mrs. Eleanor Caldwell, no relation to Dr. Caldwell, told us about her grandmother's pearl necklace, which had been worn at every major family event for 4 generations, despite being worth a fraction of the modern pearls other women wore. Judge Patricia Williams shared the story of her wedding ring, a simple band her husband had bought with his first month's salary as a young lawyer, which she'd never replaced despite his later success. Sarah Manchester, whose family owned half of Beacon Hill, confided that her most treasured piece was a charm bracelet her daughter had made for her in elementary school art class. "You know what all these stories have in common?" Marcus whispered to me during the silent auction portion of the evening. "None of them are about monetary value." He was right. Despite being surrounded by people wearing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of jewelry, the stories that mattered, the pieces that meant something, were valuable for reasons that had nothing to do with their price tags. As the evening wound down, we found ourselves in conversation with Thomas Pemberton himself, the elderly patriarch whose family foundation was hosting the event. "I've been following your story in the papers," he said with genuine interest. "Quite remarkable, really. Makes one think about all the treasures hiding in plain sight." "It's taught us a lot about assumptions," I replied. "Indeed. You know, my great-grandfather built this family's fortune in shipping. Started with one small boat that everyone said was worthless because it looked so unremarkable. He saw something others didn't, not because he was smarter, but because he looked deeper." He smiled at both of us. Sometimes the most valuable things don't announce themselves with flash and glitter. Sometimes they reveal their worth quietly to those who take the time to really see them. As we prepared to leave, my father approached us with an expression I'd rarely seen on his face, something that looked like pride mixed with humility. "Marcus," he said, extending his hand, "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what, sir?" "For showing me that I'd forgotten how to recognize real value when I see it. Your ring caused quite a stir, but watching how you and Samantha have handled all this attention, with grace, with integrity, without letting it change who you are, that's taught me more about character than any business deal ever could." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. That means a lot coming from you."
Later that night, as Marcus and I sat on my apartment's small balcony sharing a bottle of wine and decompressing from the evening, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. People are still going to talk, I said, watching the city lights twinkle below us. There will still be articles and attention and assumptions. Probably, Marcus agreed, but tonight felt different, didn't it? Like we weren't hiding or apologizing anymore. Because we weren't. We were just ourselves. Marcus reached for my hand, lifting it so the ring caught the moonlight. You know what I realized tonight? This ring isn't a burden or a complication or a stroke of luck. It's a perfect metaphor for our relationship. How so? Because the most valuable thing about us isn't what people can see from the outside. It's what we've built together. The love, the trust, the commitment to face whatever comes our way as a team. That's worth more than any diamond. I leaned against his shoulder, feeling a peace I hadn't experienced in weeks. So we're keeping it? We're keeping it all, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. The ring, the attention, the complications, the story, because it's our story, and no one else gets to decide how it ends. 6 months later, we were married in a small ceremony at Romano's Fine Jewelry. Mr. Romano, who had become not just our jeweler but our friend, officiated the ceremony in his workshop, surrounded by cases full of beautiful things waiting for their own love stories to begin. My ring continued to attract attention, but we'd learned to see it as an opportunity rather than a burden, a chance to share our story about looking beyond appearances, about finding value in unexpected places, about love that doesn't depend on price tags or social status. And whenever someone asked about the famous ring, we'd tell them the truth, that its real value had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the moment Marcus saw it and thought of me, and the moment I said yes, not to a diamond, but to a lifetime of choosing love over appearances, depth over flash, and each other over everyone else's opinions. Because sometimes the most valuable things in life come disguised as something ordinary, waiting for someone who knows how to really look to discover their true worth. And sometimes, just sometimes, love really is worth more than $2 million. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.